Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Liz Coleman, and I am part of the Global Interest Group and the film festival being put on today. And we were going to get started right now. So welcome, everyone. We would like to welcome you all to our first event of the semester. We have a link in the chat to our feedback form, which we will include again at the end, but we will be grateful for you to just keep that in mind and to give your feedback. So thank you very much. Also, as a reminder, we are recording this event. So traditionally, the film event has been a time where we gather to watch a film and then discuss the themes highlighted by the film. In order to steward our responses and time well, we decided to utilize one of our global to local slots as a film event, and so here we are. This year's film series, America's Great Divide, was suggested to us by Dr. Chris Saintville, who is here today with us, and fits well in our focus on racial justice, and additionally speaks to many of why and how questions which have arisen in the wake of the attack on the Capitol. While our time today is not intended to focus on that attack, we want to acknowledge the connection we see between the insurrection and the themes visible in the films. While we hope that many of you have been able to watch the film series and would encourage you to do so if you haven't, we recognize that many may not have been possible before today's discussion. So we have two short clips, one from each film that we think encapsulates the sentiments and themes of each. So before we show the clips, we would like to introduce our panelists, Chris Saintville, Tanya Day Miles, and Susan Weiser Inguma. Christopher Saintville, PhD, MSW, is an assistant professor at the University of Buffalo School of Social Work. Prior to his appointment, Dr. Saintville held a postdoctoral fellow position in the Department of African American Studies at the University of Maryland, College Park. Dr. Saintville's current research focuses on trauma and the experiences of victims of violent injury, as well as mentoring. Dr. Saintville received his PhD from the Howard University School of Social Work, his MSW from the State University of New York at Stony Brook, and is a former graduate education diversity fellow of the American Evaluation Association. Professor Tanya Miles Day is a full-time faculty member at Buffalo State College in the School Social Work Department. Professor Miles Day is also an adjunct professor at UB School of Social Work. Professor Miles Day received her BSW degree from Buffalo State College and her MSW degree from the University at Buffalo. Professor Miles Day went on to practice as a clinical therapist at Child and Adolescent Treatment Services, now Best Self Behavioral. Professor Miles Day specialized in individual and family therapy, is the faculty advisor for Pulse, Powerful United Ladies Striving to Elevate, where ladies of all demographics come together to educate, elevate, and empower women through a network of support on a cultural, educational, social, and personal level. Professor Weiser Inguma is an assistant professor in the undergraduate, my apologies, in the undergraduate social work department at West Chester University. Her research and practice are focused in the areas of transitional justice, international populations, and racial injustice. Currently, Susan is building a research agenda to support a national truth and transformation process in the US to address issues of racism, acknowledge whiteness, and transform our institutions to more accurately reflect the America of today. Her practice is focused on working with white individuals in affinity circles to help them understand white supremacy as a systemic issue, process racial identity, and engage in growth and support of anti-racist action. Susan is deeply committed to creating and sustaining relationships abroad to offer students the opportunity to expand their worldview, exchange ideas, and learn in a global context. So we're going to begin by showing the first two clips we have. We only have two today. So as we mentioned, we have two short clips. Each is about 3 minutes long. And our first clip comes from part one of the film, which primarily covered events that occurred during Obama's presidency. Okay. So for a little context, there we go.
Well, let's all take a collective deep breath together. How are we doing? Let's get started. Let's start easy. What stood out most for you? And let's start with Susan. When you watch this film and watch these films, what stood out most to you?
I guess watching these films in hindsight, right? Like, you see the reactions in the moment of the Obama administration and some of their disbelief around division and what's happening. But I feel like I'm watching it now and I'm thinking, how could it have been any other way? It is difficult because there are moments where you wonder, where are we going? How do we overcome this? And there is that hesitation or trepidation about, do we have enough to move forward to pull ourselves out of this division, right? And I think that it's a really scary question and a really scary time for a lot of folks.
Tanya, what stood out most to you?
Hi guys. For me, it was the inevitability of watching a transition that was inevitable to occur. In Obama's administration, there was already this divide. There was already a divide, right? And that divide was, it could be lack of opinion, right? For me, it was simply because Obama was Black, he was African American. So there was already a divide there. And I think that the Trump administration, that hopelessness was already coming to pass, right? Because we were having this, we were at this impasse. And Trump's administration, it just perpetuated for me the hopelessness, the inevitable that was going to occur, just based on that previous administration. And now, you know, we're in this administration where no holds bars, right? Let's just put it out there. And that's, I just saw the inevitable in both clips, from one administration to the next administration, what was going to happen. And ultimately, right, it did. And it for me, it was just a sense of hopelessness. That's where I was, a sense of hopelessness.
Chris.
What stood out to me most is the egregiousness of the Republican Party. Like when Obama got in, the main charge by Mitch McConnell was, yo, we just don't want you to be successful. It's not about the country. It's not about the people. It's not about the issues affecting us as a country. He just come out and said it like, yo, we don't want him to be a successful president. He's not going to get nothing passed, you know, as long as we have something to do with it. So I guess that attitude is what, you know, strikes me the most. Like, they're just obstructionists. And then there's no logic or reason to it other than the fact that, yo, we just don't want you to be successful. And I think that, you know, they basically sabotage the political process. And what stands out to me the most is, how do they get to do this over and over again? Why do we as a people, as citizens, allow one party to hold all of us hostage? You know, and it doesn't help that they only won the popular vote like once in the last 3 decades. So the minority has been kind of, you know, keeping us from unifying, you know, what we've been trying to do, you know? So I don't know. I feel like the documentary kind of tries to spread this across both parties, but I don't see that is being evenly spread across both parties. I see one party that is viewed as the obstructionist that prevents us from uniting. And that's what strikes me the most, and how we continue to let them do this over and over again.
Chris, would you continue on that vein to talk about what you think are the reasons for which we see a divide in this country? And then I'll have Tanya and Susan respond.
I disagree with the documentary. I don't think the divide started with Sarah Palin. I think the divide was here way before Sarah Palin. And if you really look back at political history, I mean, this divide started from the beginning of the country. But from a political standpoint, it really started in 1964 with Strom Thurmond, a staunch segregationist who was in, which is what makes, you know, systemic racism. We got people who make policy who we know are racist, and they're allowed to, to put their 2 cents in, which either prevents policy from uniting us or promoting other policy that further divides us. So I don't think this thing started with Sarah Palin. This thing started from the beginning of the country with Thomas Jefferson and them, with their attitudes toward anti-Blackness. And then Strom Thurmond in 1964 is what solidified the Republican Party for what it is today, the party of George Wallace, the Dixiecrats, the people who espoused states' rights and wanted Black people to not have rights. We basically said, you guys get to share in the power. That's basically what happened. Y'all racist, you want these people off the face of the earth. We had a civil war to help get you straight, but now that it's all over, we're gonna let you into the reins of power and to dictate how policy goes. This is why we can't move any further than we are now, because we want to negotiate with racist people and give them a voice. And I know I'm oversimplifying it a little bit, but that's where it started at in 1964. And then all of those state right Southern Democrats followed Strom Thurmond. That was the party of racists. I'm oversimplifying, but that's where the racists went to have their voice heard.
Okay, so Dr. Sayville, all right, we gonna have real conversation, and I love it. Here's the deal, right? When we talk about where it started, and we know where it started, but we talk about, I agree with Dr. Sayville, how it continues to exist, right? First and foremost, power, right? They want power. They've always had it. They want it, they don't want to relinquish it. And at any means, by any means necessary, this is what we will do, whatever it is that we need to. So as my grandmother would say, keep my foot on your neck, right? Whatever it is that needs to happen for us to keep the foot on the necks of people of color so that we can continue to have our power and our privilege, right? And so how that starts to shift and how that starts to change, first and foremost, white privilege needs to be recognized. It can no longer continue to be swept under the rug that I don't get the same advantage that another, my white counterpart, a woman, is gonna get. I'm not gonna get that advantage simply because of the fact that I am Black. I'm not oblivious to that. So when we start to talk about shifting, right? Things will not shift until, again, I agree with Dr. Sayville, right? Because we're going to call it for what it is, right? We have racist individuals, 3 men in a room, right? Racist individuals that are in places of power. So the policies that are made in the, it's not intended to help the individuals that are in need of it. It's intended, in essence, for me, right? To keep the foot on the neck of the individuals that need it, but in the same vein, we'll continue to line our pockets, right? We'll continue to pat ourselves. We'll continue to keep our power. It didn't start, again, with Obama. It's been here. Social injustice and racism has been here since the beginning of time. Now, I don't want to get biblical, but since the beginning of time. So the reality of it is, until we have that real conversation, right? And people can say, I'm racist. I'd rather you just tell me that you're racist and go and get away. Or look at it from a different place and perspective. Am I racist, or was I taught to be racist? Right? Because a lot of the behavior that we see in terms of social injustice, inequity, marginalization, gentrification, racism, I feel, this is me, those, and I'm on the other end of that thing, right? It's my experience. I live in the suburbs, and people have said, oh, have you ever been pulled over by the police? Here's the reality: never have been. But you know why I know that I haven't been? Because they know who lives here. They know I live here. I've been here for a very long time. But people that have visited me have been. So the reality of this thing, until we recognize that racism is there, until we stop putting people in places of power, it's not about your own opinion. It is about what's going to be beneficial for the country and for the people that put you in these places of power. Bigger than that, we as a people need to stop putting people that are racist in places of power. Rant over.
All right, y'all make it difficult to follow. You said everything. So I agree with everything that's been said. And I think that in this country, the danger is not with the people who will tell you that they're racist, or at least will say it in their own minds, right? The danger is in the masses of white folks that have received improper education, right? Our education system is right? History is always told by the victors, right? History is always told by people who have the power and who have the privilege, and they tell the story they want you to know, not necessarily the story that's real. And so this does go much further back than this documentary talks about. And one of the major issues I see in this country is that you cannot end a problematic policy and expect that the root of the creation of that policy is going to go away if you don't deal with the root problem, right? So when we're talking about policies that are rooted in white supremacy, yeah, we ended slavery. Cool, got Jim Crow. Ended Jim Crow, cool, got segregation. Ended segregation, cool, got mass incarceration, right? Like, we keep reinventing the white supremacist policies and systems that continue to oppress and marginalize and hold people down. And so until we, as my colleagues have already very clearly said, tell the truth, right? As individual people, but also as organizations, as systems, as a country, right? There's levels to the truth, right? But until we do that, we are just going to continue to reinvent these systems that continue to divide, right? And continue to oppress and hold people down.
Thank you so much. So eloquently put. And we're going to move to something perhaps a little more complex. The answers are not clear, but what steps do you think are necessary, both at the national level, but in local communities as well, to be able to move forward and move toward what many are calling unity? Like, how do you think that can be made possible? Is it possible? Who wants to start? I'll let you decide. Raise your hand. Switch it up a bit. Tanya.
It is absolutely possible. And that's because I'm hopeful, and then I am this optimist, right? I've watched consistently since the summer in the peaceful protest, and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and I've watched diversity at its best, right? I've literally watched individuals come together from all backgrounds, all races, all ethnicities, all genders, all gender identifications, whatever adjectives that we can throw in there. I've watched these individuals of this generation come together and say, no, we can no longer be silent about what we are seeing occur. For me, it is accountability. It is accountability, holding the powers that be accountable. There's no way that we can have a congresswoman, senator that spewed all that garbage over the last couple of weeks. How can you sit in a place of authority and be that biased and that cruel? This generation, I admire the generation that my children are growing up in, right? Because it's inclusive. They don't see color, they don't see race, they don't see gender. They see that is my friend. We had a lot that can learn. We can learn a lot from this generation, right? And how we're going to move forward with this thing is accountability, individuals saying, that is me, but most importantly, us the people saying that isn't what we want. We want inclusivity. We want everyone to have a seat at the table, for there to be representation for everyone, be it whether we agree or not. We don't have to agree with one another, but it is about what's going to be best for us collectively as race. We're just a race, whether you black, white, green, yellow, purple, we're human beings. We need decent human beings in government. We need decent human beings in the political arena that are speaking for us. And until we get that, and all of these personal agendas are removed, everyone has a personal agenda, and it's about what they want, and it's not what's best for us as a people. Our country, if we can move forward, some people need to go sit down. We got some Republicans that need to go sit down, right? Some Democrats too. And allow a new age of thinkers, a new age of not just thinkers, critical thinkers, right? A new age of individuals that have ideas that are going to expand beyond that old concept of doing things the way that things have always been done. And until we can put people in those places, we have power as people. We need to exercise that and get rid of all of the antiquated thinking so that we can start to move forward and unify. You don't have to like Black people. You don't have to like white people. You don't have to like green people. You don't have to like Asian people. You don't have to like Native American people. But we do have to respect one another as a race. We need to respect one another as human beings. Get the antiquated people out the way. Sat them down, right? Let's move forward. We can do that.
Politicians aren't the example for unity, and they should never be, right? You know, every time an election comes up, both nationally and locally, they resort to these tactics that then divide us further. And we need to learn from that and stop allowing, you know what I'm saying? So as Tanya said, you know, this unity that everybody's asking about, it's here. You see it in certain places. We see it. Where we don't see it is in DC. Where we don't see it is in DC and all their rhetoric, you know? And so, you know, I think we really need to stop giving so much power to the politicians. They're a theater, theatrics, you know, they're a soap opera, and we should treat them as such, you know? And I think we need to kind of focus more locally on what's going on in our community and building with each other and continuing without allowing these politicians to form these wedges to meet their political goals and their political aims. We're pawns, and we keep being used as pawns. And, you know, and Susan is right. We reduce our likelihood to be used as pawns if we improve our education. If we improve our education around how things, you know, how things work around here. We're just not that informed enough to actually make things, you know, to change things. You know, a democracy requires an informed an informed mass in order for democracy to function. It's beyond the scope of this right here, but I don't even think we're in a democracy. But that's beyond the scope of this right here. But if we have 50% of the adult population in America that's illiterate, can't even read, then education will probably also be meaningless too, because they, you know what I'm saying? So our political machine, they're able to function the way that they do because we are uneducated. We're one of the most uneducated developed countries in the Western Hemisphere, you know, and to be the most powerful, I don't understand that, but yeah, we don't value education. And like I said, we want to keep our people illiterate for the politicians to be able to do what they want to do. If we were informed and critical thinkers, there's no way they would be able to do this on us. We'd be more like Australia, where 98% of their population actually votes, which is insane, right? We're nowhere near that. We're not educated enough.
And I think that goes back to the power, right? And you said that, like, if you're in power and you want to keep people down, you don't educate them, right? You don't give them access to be educated. And so I think one of the things that's really important is that we start working in our own communities, advocating and pushing for self-education, right? You don't know what you don't know till you learn it. And so I think that ultimately, right, a lot of my work and a lot of my research pushes towards truth and transformation in the United States, which is something that has been done in tiny little pockets in the US, but certainly not anything nationally in the ways that it's been used in like South Africa with apartheid. I think that's probably the most well-known example, but we got a whole lot of preparatory work to do, I think, before we get to any kind of like official national process. I think that what Tanya said about, seeing people as human beings, right? I think that is super important. And also, I want to push back a little bit because I think that I think the vast majority of white people in the United States will say that they're not racist and truly mean it and truly be well-intentioned, having never examined their own white racial identity, having never thought about it as an identity, think about themselves as the norm and everybody else is other, and have not explored that because as white people, we're not pushed to do that. We're not forced to do that, right? This was a system that was created around us. And so there's this bubble. And I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done for white people to start thinking about what does a more equitable United States look like? What might I lose in that? Did I have the right to what I might lose in the first place, or was it unearned based on this privilege that I have? And how do I deal with that? How do I confront that, and how do I deal with that? Because it is going to feel like a loss, whether it was a earned or unearned loss, an earned or unearned privilege. And that's deep, hard work that like white people need to be doing. And push it, and then pushing for broader national shifts and changes. And I'm not idealistic. I don't think everybody is going to come to terms with that. But I think more people need to be having those conversations and coming to terms with the reality and the truth of what it means to be white in the United States.
Shasta, can I interject there? I just
Yes,
want to
absolutely.
say, Susan, I agree with Susan about that in terms of becoming anti, but it's painful.
Oh yeah.
It's very painful to grow up in a manner, or you're raised in a manner to only discover that as you get older and you become educated and knowledgeable about things, and you're introduced to different races and you're introduced to different cultures, that what you were reared upon was a fallacy. That's and then you have to say to yourself, that's painful to have to say to yourself, I'm racist, based on what I was taught, based on how I was reared, based on other people's experience that was not even your own. They fed you a crock of crap that now you have to get into the real world, and now you're unequipped.
Mhm.
It's painful. So people would rather stay comfortable, stick with what you know, as opposed to facing that, accepting it, and changing it.
That's a really great segue into my question, which I have for you, Tanya, and of course, Chris and Susan, feel free to respond as well. But why do you think that we as a society are unable to have real, open, honest conversations about racism and marginalization, which takes global forms as the Bush-era war in Iraq exemplifies? Why is it so hard? And you
I don't think
touch upon some of these things, but more concretely.
I don't think it's hard for some people, but for the vast majority it is. And it's just for the reason I stated. People you don't want to have to shift from your value systems, your belief systems, right? Those things are embedded in us. I was raised by a single mother, African-American woman with 3 daughters. And my mother got married when I was probably about 20 years old, right? So most of my child and adolescent and young adult life, it was me, my mom, and my 2 siblings. And I remember my mother saying to me, you ought to always be an independent woman. You always work. You always take care of yourself, because no man's going to take care of you. So you have to be these things for yourself, right? And it wasn't until about, I've been married about 21 years, 22 years. I've been with my husband a quarter of a century. And it wasn't until about 10 years ago that I had to, in a very nice, respectful manner, tell my mother that she lied to me, right? But here's a hit. Her experience shaped her. And she could only pass on to me what she knew. She could only give me what her experience was. It did not, in fact, mean that that was going to be my experience, because my husband's very kind to me. He does what a husband is supposed to do. She had never experienced that. She was on the other end of the spectrum, right? So with that being said, how I was able to say, Mom, you told me a lie. That's not true. Until people can go to their folk and say, listen, I have an Indian friend that is totally awesome. And what you, mom, dad, uncle, cousin, brother, sister, whomever you may be, think about this particular race, you're wrong. So that stereotype that is placed on African-American people, that we're lazy, we don't want to work, we want to sit on welfare, which I have never figured out that we make up how much of the population, but we're this vast majority of individuals that receive public assistance. That stereotype, right, that's connected to us, until someone starts to say to people, you're lying, right? That's a lie. I have an African-American instructor. I have an African-American friend. I have an African-American colleague. I watch them work harder than anyone that could possibly work, because I have to, because I still don't forget that the color of my skin makes a difference, Whenever I walk into a room, it makes a difference. The only difference that I'm acceptable. I'm acceptable. I am an acceptable African-American woman. Why? I'm educated. Okay. That socioeconomic status that the powers that be or certain people deem acceptable. So unfortunately for us, there are some people of color that I've discovered in my experience that are acceptable. I'm one of those acceptable people. But who deems whom to be acceptable? Right? How is that measured? We don't get an opportunity to even know anything about people of color if we don't sit down and have a conversation with them and find out things about them versus what we've been taught or what we think we know, or going along with the basic stereotypical conversations that we often hear people have. Are we still going to have races that just because I'm Black, they're not going to like me? Absolutely. But that's by choice. You choose to be ignorant. You choose to not get educated. You choose to not understand. And we're not going to change people like that. I'm talking about the hope of individuals that want to know. If you want to know, talk to me. That's how we shift. Don't listen. Don't feel that you're hurting my feelings by asking me about my hair, right? It's evident that my hair is different from Liz's hair. And so for Liz to ask me, hey, your hair, I see it's braided. Can you, I don't take that as being offensive. What I take it is that she's trying to find out something about me and my culture. Why do you wear your hair like that? Do you get what I'm saying? We got to shift the way that we think that people are occurring with us and to us.
Chris and Susan, do you want to respond or add to that?
I mean, I'll just say that so I'll speak a little bit to my own experience, which to my knowledge that I can remember, I do not remember learning any negative stereotypes from my parents. My parents were describe the little girl by the purple dress that she's wearing, or like, we don't see color, people don't have color, except what I didn't think about at that time was that like that was only in conjunction to people who weren't white, and so I didn't think about it obviously at 5 like that. But I was raised by parents who grew up in the 60s and lived in Columbus, Mississippi in the late 60s and saw deep, raw, nasty racism and segregation, and did everything that they could in raising me to not have me judge people based upon the ways in which they looked. And yet and still, I have all of these stereotypes, right, that I have absorbed through the socialization of American society, right? That on television, most of the TV shows I watched had all white characters. And if there was a person of color, it was in a stereotypical role or a side role, or, there wasn't anybody, well, for the most part, right? That was representational of anything but white, middle class, suburban culture. And so I've had conversations with my parents about this idea of colorblindness, and good conversations and real conversations where they can see that point. And I just kind of go back to that, like, you don't know what you don't know. And if I had not had some very generous friends who are not white, who shared with me that something I said or something that I did was harmful or hurtful, and I did not take it well, when they told me. I was defensive. I was like, that's not me. I'm not racist, right? It took me a very long time of getting messaging over time of thinking like, oh, like I need to re-educate myself on this, or I need to understand this better. It's been a long journey. It is still a journey. I haven't checked the box, like I'm done. And so there's so much complexity and nuance to understanding the depths of how we internalize our racialized society and how we internalize messaging about race and about who we are. And sorry, I think your question was where do we start? And I think that it's having those conversations that are really uncomfortable, and taking that risk, and taking that, being willing to be uncomfortable so that we can get to the other side of this, because there's no way that you cannot address your own issues, that you cannot address your own internalized stuff and just say like, oh, like I'm done, like, and now we're on the path to anti-racism. Like that's never going to happen. Like that's a fantasy. And so I think starting out small and having these conversations with the people you care about or the people that you love, inviting small groups of people in communities to talk about these things, and determining what's the best fit. Like, do we have like a multi-racial, multi-ethnic group conversation? Are we concerned about harm? Do we need to have like an affinity group for white folks, an affinity group for African-American folks that can eventually come together? Like, how do we do this work in a way that's meaningful and can ripple out, and hopefully create less harm, right? And more positive outcomes.
And Susan, I appreciate everything you just said, and I appreciate most of the comment that like, yo, I ain't there yet. You know what I'm saying? Like, so many white people tell me, yo, I'm not racist, I ain't prejudiced, all that. I'm prejudiced. I got issues with women. I'm a chauvinist. You feel me? You know, I probably still got issues with gay people, but you know what I'm saying, that when I was little. You understand what I'm saying? So the point is, yo, you ain't never there. You ain't never gonna get there, right? I wanna be a good person. I wanna be a better father. I ain't there yet. You feel me? I work on it. And I constantly check myself. You know what I'm saying? I ain't gonna say it till I ain't no male showing. Yo, every day I get up in the morning and I gotta tell yo, Chris, you gotta respect these women. You know, unconsciously you making them feel uncomfortable. Unconsciously you make LGBTQ people feel some kind of way. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm never there. The work is in waking up and being conscious and then working at it every day to make sure. So as soon as somebody come up to you and tell you that they there, that's the main, that comment right there is the main indication that they ain't arrived yet. Thank you for that comment, Dr. Susan.
Yes, thank you. That's and brilliantly put, all of you. And also, please, take your gaze to the chat. We have a beautiful chat going on the side as well. And, I love that everyone's participating and talking to one another and responding to the questions that we're asking as well. And I think Tanya's crying.
I'm about to cry because I am sitting here watching. And I'm a very emotional person. I am, but I'm sitting here looking, oh, Chris, let me tell you, we're never there, right? We got stuff, man. And I'm watching this young lady, oh my God, Condra, and she's talking about her family and how she had to disconnect and how hard that is. And that is because she's trying, what Chris just said, she recognized some things and she's trying. And so if that means I have to get some of these toxic people away from me, and it's hard, be it that's my family, but I want to be better, man. I want to be better. So that may mean I need to cut some people off. Listen, consciousness. That's a word I keep seeing, consciousness. We have to be aware with our own stuff, and then be honest. Be honest. Listen, I'm with Chris. I had to check myself about the LGBTQ plus community, right? Guess where the checking started? When my daughter came out, I had to start checking me. It ain't about how somebody else chooses to live. It's about that compassion and that love and that empathy within me that I need to be able to give to somebody. And who better can I give that to than my own child, which opens my eyes to see things from that perspective of the LGBTQ plus community. I had to get educated, y'all. I had to get educated. And not just say, oh, that's wrong. Who am I to say something is wrong? Somebody can say I'm wrong for wearing my hair like this today. I am passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about not just my people. I'm passionate about people. And that as human beings that we can do so much better. And I think if we are constantly in a place of our own self-awareness, man, those buttons, right? That people can push with us, but we can navigate that thing and we can regulate ourselves, and then we can be honest with ourselves. I have to be honest with myself on any given day that I just can be a beast sometimes and have to pull that thing back, because it affects the relationships. And I don't want to affect those relationships that are important to me. And even when that conversation is hard to have, I have to be very gentle with my sender skills, y'all. I have to be very gentle, because I can just go to 100. But I got to, most importantly, not listen. I got to hear. And I hear with my heart. I hear with my heart. And I hear people, I'm hearing this lady's pain just in her words. I hear with my heart. We got to do better. And we are the change agents. We are the ones. We need to be at the table with the policy making, man. How you going to tell me what my community need and you not in my community? How you going to tell me what the single mother need in terms of day, and you not in those shoes? But you don't want to put us at the table, because that's where the light comes in at. We're going to give you a clear depiction, a clear picture of what it really is in our communities. Y'all don't want us there. Oh. Kendra, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kendra. And I think that's your example was a really good segue for our question for Chris, to whom I ask, what do you think are the key barriers we need to overcome to address the divide that we're discussing today, and the divide that's discussed in the films? That sounds like such a black and white question in response to all this, in this lively conversation. But I think we do still want to get to some of the meat of what we can do. What are the key barriers that we need to overcome?
So first, I think race baiting in politics should be phased out, like as a practice, right? So everyone knows race baiting when they see it. It's in terms of, I'm 43, right? Born in 77. So it's happened almost in every election in my lifetime. So I'm a Carter baby, right? So then, Reagan did it in his famous speech, right? In Mississippi at the Neshoba County Fair, where he invoked state rights, and he used the whole welfare queen concept during his election. After Reagan, George Bush, 2000, he suggested that Senator McCain's Senator McCain adopted a daughter from Bangladesh, and I think Bush came out and said that the baby was black from born out of wedlock. McCain lost South Carolina after he did that. McCain was about to win. He had about a large margin. And then Bush came out and said that he adopted a black kid. He lost in South Carolina, his wide margin. And we all know George Bush Sr. in the Willie Horton ad that he used against Mike Dukakis, because Mike Dukakis had the furlough program going, So this practice needs to be called out and phased out. So in a nation with such a tumultuous history of race-based violence in politics, we cannot allow politicians to benefit from the use of division, right? What does that say about us as a country that we as citizens allow our leaders to engage in divisive behavior for political gain? So politicians who use such tactics to divide our country for political points should not be allowed to hold office. It says a lot about your character as a politician when you decide to take the low road during a period of adversity, right? So in all honesty, politicians and their politics share the blame in why this country remains divided, right? And then lastly, education. I'm just education. We need to completely revamp the way we teach and communicate our history in this country. The current manner in which we relay the roots and the origins of this country is antiquated, incomplete, and replete with inaccuracies and half-truths. So, for example, Black people, your man, what was Ben Carson, right? Black people are voluntary immigrants. Slavery was a happy institution. People was happy during slavery. Everybody had a fair chance at engaging with the system of capitalism. Everybody pulled up their bootstraps. The idea that racism ended after 1864, after the man, all of this is nonsense. All of these are in textbooks. They're in textbooks in the US, in history textbooks. So this framing, right, of how our history is told, it's more poignantly explained by James Loewen in his book, The Lies My Teachers Told Me, right? But the lack of a shared, agreed upon history of how we started is what prevents us from moving forward. It's what prevents the likes of those who stormed the Capitol to understand the history of how poor, disadvantaged whites were always manipulated by the political and the gilded class to vote against their own interests. So in order for democracy to work, people gotta be educated, informed, and civically engaged. We can't be surprised that in our country that people are easily swayed by conspiracy theories and alternative facts when 50% of the adults can't even freaking read an alternative source of information if they wanted to. You know what I mean? So our nation is not interested in educated critical thinkers going to the polls. They are more interested in mindless consumers who vote along party lines and can be manipulated and wielded with certain catchphrases to achieve a political aim. So while politicians call our country a democracy, we as citizens, we can never really, this place is not a democracy until we are educated citizens. And until that, I don't even think we live in a democracy. I think we're being kept from becoming a democracy by not educating our populace in critical thinking and in the correct way.
And my question for Susan is, what might truth and transformation look like here in the United States?
Complicated, long, not an easy process. So traditionally, truth and transformation is, there's a variety of components to it, right? So there is the truth process, which can be formal, it can be informal. And what you're looking for in a truth process is people having the freedom to tell their own truths, right? And through the collection of those individual truths, if it's a formal process like a truth commission, then collects all of those truths to create a national truth, right? That is more reflective of the actual history in a country. But there's also other processes, right? I'm not sure what the legal process would look like in the US that's a little bit complex. And I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to skip over that, though there are legal routes to it. But there's also opportunities for reparations. And we talk a lot about reparations in the United States. And I think a lot of people immediately think money. And money is a possibility in terms of reparations, but reparations can be the renaming of places or the naming of places to be representative of your broader community. It can be the removal of monuments, as we've already kind of seen happening in this country. It can be policies that will minimize the wealth gap, right? A whole variety of things could be. In South Africa, right now, there's a significant amount of turmoil because land is being reclaimed, land that was taken from Black Africans by colonizers maybe 100 years ago, 200 years ago. It's being reclaimed, and that's creating a lot of conflict right now. But there's reparations can be a huge wide range of things. And then institutional change, right? So when you have the truths and you've built your national truth, you can then begin to recreate your institutions as a reflection of who you are as a present nation. And so things that have been talked about in the United States is a new constitution, which everybody's like, right? Because we're all indoctrinated with like the history of 1776 and the Declaration of Independence. And then we got our Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and it's like the thing. But that was happening simultaneously with slavery, with chattel slavery of human beings. Like, so, potentially new documentation, new laws, new systems of education, new systems of policing, criminal justice. And so it's a big systematic change. And that's just like a tiny little overview, but I think it really starts, in the exact same way that policy change happens now. It starts locally in your home communities, in your home, like who are your people and how can you work with them? And how can you make that work ripple out to other folks and kind of grow the masses for support?
It sounds like it starts with hope, right? And so my question for all of you again is, what does hope and change look like to you? And that's my last question. After this, we welcome questions from the audience. If you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, that's perfectly fine. If you want to type on the chat, that's fine too. If you would not like to share who you are, you can text Liz or me, and we'll be happy to ask that question for you. But before that, last question from me for the panelists, what does hope and change look like to you? Chris, do you want to start?
What's going on here right now, being able to have a conversation. I mean, we weren't even having these conversations maybe 2 years ago, and so the fact that now people are now waking up is about as much hope as I could, ask for, right? Like the political establishment is like, it's like sustained, you know what I mean? They're sustained, like they created this system where it just keeps going, you know what I mean? Strom Thurmond was in Congress from 1954 to 2003. I think he left when he was 100 years old. Who took his place? Lindsey Graham. So we at the bottom have to have these conversations. And I think the people, we at the bottom, this gives me hope, you know what I mean? And we need to continue having conversations like this. When my students, open their eyes in my classrooms and they tell me, they hit me with an email like, yo, Dr. Chris, you made me look at something differently, then, this is my role. This is my contribution. And that's what gives me hope when I got students that understand, when I have white students that understand, And, you know, in these conversations, you know, that's what, you know, that's the hope. Other than that, you know, like, I think you know, the fact that Kamala is the vice president now, we got a Black woman in there, you know, it's overshadowing so many of the problems that we need to deal with. Oh, we got the first Black woman vice president, right? And then no, that is a tremendous feat, and I'm happy about that. I'm happy for her. I'm happy that we was able to, you know, but the first Black president, what did that mean? That meant Trump. So what's Kamala gonna mean? You know what I'm saying? So that's not enough, you know? Like, we can't let those small gains make us feel like, oh, we getting it. No, we're not. She's just a figurehead. She just there, same like Obama. They just, you know, and just because 1 and 2 of you made it that doesn't mean change. That's not progress, just 1 or 2 people. You feel me? And so I think this is where the hope is, that, you know, hopefully some of us that are getting older, we slowly transition into positions of power in politics, maybe. But like I said, I don't think the change is gonna happen from the top. Trickle down don't work. We need to trickle up. So the people down here, we need to make the moves. And I think politics is just a soap opera, and all my children never really changes. You know what I'm saying? So.
Absolutely. Tanya.
Hope for me is us. I agree with Chris. Just this platform, right? Hope for me started with you know, a little bit after COVID, right? When I saw a diverse group of people, be it all ages, races, colors, you know, come together and band together and stand for what is right. In the wake of George Floyd's death and all of those deaths of African American men and women that occurred before his, this summer was hope for me. Holding law enforcement accountable. We started seeing this trend. And I know it's a lot of talk about things that we need to do in terms of law enforcement. Just the idea of having social workers a part of law enforcement to deal with individuals that may have mental health issues, or, you know, those kinds of things. Hope for me is, yeah, I'm excited about Kamala Harris. I'm very excited about Kamala Harris, but Kamala Harris is not the means to an end for us, right? It is not. I don't believe in the trickle down effect. I don't. Right. I believe sometimes we got to hit the ground running, boots blazing and guns blazing to go in and to get things done. And I think when we start at the ground level, it establishes that accountability factor. Right. Hope for me is revamping this raggedy constitution that we got that still has systemic racist oppressive language in it. Right. People don't think that, people see it, but we see it. And when I say oppressive language, I'm not talking about color. See, we need to get that one. Racism ain't just about color, right? That language that still exists in that document that everybody always wants to jump up and hold up, and this is what we being true to. They are being true to it. They're not lying about that, right? That's where some change and hope for me. Let's start to have a conversation about that. Let's revise that. Make those things equitable. Now, is it going to always be fair? Nope, not going to be fair. But I'll say this: I want things to be beneficial for me as an African American woman, beneficial as an African American race. If it's for the LGBTQ plus community. You know, I said to students in class one day, and I said, why do you think the LGBT, because y'all go hard, man. I said, why do you think they go so hard for their rights? And everybody is just looking. You know why? The LGBTQ plus community was never considered. The Constitution was written for whom? They were never considered. So they stood in solidarity together to see change happen. And it did. Now, are we there? No. So if that community can come together, and then African American people can come together, and then white people can come together, and then Indian people and Native American and Asians, everybody, and say that Constitution ain't beneficial for us. We need to do away with that, right? We know we need laws to govern the land. We understand that. But the laws that are governing the land are not governing the ones that made the laws. We need the ones that make the laws to be accountable. And hope is there. Having these conversations, honest conversations, telling not just our truth, but the truth. Recognizing reparations can't be made. Dr. Smith just said it, not until we are able to admit the harm that was done. If we can't talk about what happened to Black folk, forget about it. No more sweeping under the rug. We got to have that conversation and keep having them.
Susan.
I was going to say the same thing that Tanya said. This summer was hope to me. There was something, now obviously, like there was just something so empowering and beautiful and energizing about marching with people in the middle of a pandemic. People were out wearing their masks, doing their thing. There were people on every block. I mean, in Philadelphia, we had tens of thousands of people marching in the streets for weekends on end. And every single weekend, there were people on every corner with hand sanitizer and snack bags and caring for one another. And that to me is the key. We in this country have gotten very individualistic. We've gotten very like, oh, that's not my business. Like, I'm just going to go over here and mind my own business. That's not my business. I didn't see that. I didn't say that. Nope. And when you lose the connectivity, when you lose the collectiveness of your community, you lose the ability to affect change. And so seeing so many people come out for the same cause, and then seeing so many people doing their part, right? Everybody's got a role to play. Some of us walk, some of us hand out hand sanitizer, some of us have water, some of us donated food because we didn't feel safe coming out in the pandemic, but I'm going to drop off these granola bars and they'll go to people who do feel safe, right? That collective nature of making something happen was very hope instilling to me.
Perfect. And now questions from the audience. Who has a question? You can raise your hand or just unmute yourself and speak. We had a question earlier on. Liz, do you have that? From Andrew. Andrew, are you still here? I know you had a question. I see Nancy's hand up. Nancy, go ahead.
Okay. So I think I've been thinking about the Great Divide that we started with. And I think part of what I struggle with there is and I'm kind of curious what the folks here might have to say, that really portrays the divide as a Democrat versus Republican divide. And I think the Republicans have been much more overt and egregious, but I get really alarmed by my friends who now are like, oh, we have a Democrat in office. So the work has stopped. A lot of the work has stopped for people. And I guess I would welcome some thoughts about how we need to look at the Democratic Party as well. And I might add, I'm a lifelong Democrat. But I am concerned that we tend to see this through that lens and then think, well, if we get a Democrat in, we don't have to worry about this stuff. And that's just not true. I mean, Biden just came out with a policy about prisons, that we're not going to outsource prisons to private companies. That sounded terrific, but it was just for federal situations, and it didn't apply to the cases where we actually do it. So it sounds like, we've done a pro racial justice thing when we haven't. And that's what I think I've seen in the Democratic parties. I'm curious what speakers have to say about that as well.
Dr. Smith is just more gaslighting. I get more gaslighting. So, and I tend to agree with you because I've heard it. Oh, we got a Democratic president now, and this is going to be da, da, da. Well, we had one when Obama was there, right? And here's the reality. Uncle Joe, that's what I call him, Uncle Joe, right? Uncle Joe is not going to be able to get anything done, okay, until it's still going to be that I feel like it's still going to be that you wash my back, I'll wash yours. I feel like they'll give us these little crumbs. So as you're talking about the federal policy in terms of prisons, but where that it doesn't necessarily apply, right? And where we need that to happen, that isn't where it's going to happen. That's that little crumb, right? It's still going to happen. We're still going to function. Our government is not going to function much differently. We may see that overt hatred, right, dissipate, but I don't think we're going to see as much as maybe we would like to see, or what we fooled ourselves to believe that we're going to see, because we have a Democratic president. My son's 20. He told me we're not in a true democracy, Ma. A true democracy, we would vote on everything. No one would work, no one would eat, no one would sleep, because we would be voting all the time. Now, what we've decided to do is put people in place to be our voice. So until we can make those voices that we put in place hear our voice, we're going to have the same rhetoric. It's just going to look a little different, because you know what they're going to do? They're going to throw little kibbles and bits out there just to keep us quiet or appease us a little bit. But it's going to be the same thing. I hear you. Accountability.
Nah, I agree, Dean Smith, and while I did, the Democrats do not have the moral imperative here. They also engaged in race baiting in politics. If we all remember when Bill Clinton, during his I think it was the first one, when he went golfing at a segregated golf course in Arkansas to prove a point. And then when he criticized Sister Soldier, all of those were points to try to make sure that he got that Southern white vote, And so, but at the end of the day, beyond the scope of this discussion, of course, we got to do away with the two-party system. That's beyond the scope of this. But no, I totally agree with you, Dean Smith, that it's a political machine, and the two parties at the top engage in an agreement where they're able to stay at the zenith of that platform, And at the end of the day, no, the Democrats are no better. I mean, at the end of the day, this past election was really about who you like the least, or whatever, right? Biden, man, Biden was the author of the crime bill. There was some things he said back in the day, I wasn't feeling you. And the Democrats, the Congressional Black Caucus supported the crack laws and the Rockefeller drug laws and all of that, So I totally agree with you, Dean Smith, and we got to do away with this two-party system where none of them hold each other really accountable and engage in this sort of soap opera theater, you know what I mean? That gets us in these kind of, these spinning in these wheels.
I was just going to say the two-party system, right, is super problematic. And I see this faction of Republicans potentially shifting to this other party, whatever it might be, if it actually comes to fruition. And I think that Democrats, I think I don't know if this is true or not. I'm going to guess that there's been a significant amount of fear about creating any kind of division, right, in the Democratic Party, because the Republican Party held all of the power. So if you create a split, you're going to lose everything, because half your people are going to go over here and half your people are going to go over there. If the Republican Party splits, if we stay together, that creates a little bit of an advantage and also it leaves us with the status quo. It also opens up an opportunity for a split, right, as well. And then you have this kind of like centrist group of Democrats and Republicans who probably see more eye to eye on things than not. And you have super kind of progressive radical folks on one end and super conservative radical folks on the other end. And I don't know how that would look and how it would shift. But I think that changes some of the conversation in the Democratic Party specifically.
Other questions? Don't be shy, but take a minute to think if you need to.
Well, there's a question in here in the chat, right, about how do you unseat people who are voted into office by constituents, right? And then once again, you know, when we talk about education, right, it's not just about educating people around knowledge and history. It's also about educating people about the political process, right? I remember in one class, you know, the students brought up the fact, like, yo, Dr. Chris, you know, why do they make voting so confusing? You know what I mean? Like, the simple thing is go vote. That's the simple thing. But what they don't have in there is like, if you're registered as a Republican, you can't vote in this primary, or then you got all these idiosyncratic rules. These are the rules they're not trying to let anybody understand. Those are made confusing on purpose to kind of hamstring you. You know what I mean? So, you know, how do we unseat people who are voted into office? Yo, okay, that's a great question. You know, let me rephrase that. How do we unseat Josh Hawley? How do we unseat Marjorie Taylor Greene? How do we unseat Lauren Boebert? She tries to bring a gun into the chambers. Could you imagine if I had a gun on me and I walked into the Capitol? You understand what I'm saying? And then no reprimand. She's a politician that represents our country. She's unhinged. Then Marjorie Taylor Greene and the QAnon and all the nonsense, why are you trying to strip her committee assignments rather than getting her out of there completely? She don't belong there. They don't represent our country. They don't represent the ideals we're trying to espouse. Why? That isn't the way they're dealing with those people is an indicator to me of how they feel about me, about other people, and some other things going on in our country. So that is a terrific question. How do we get those people out of there? And why are the Republicans willing to keep Marjorie Boebert and Josh Hawley, but they trying to get rid of Liz Cheney, one of the only people who voted with her conscience? The campaign is going hard to get Liz out, but you want to keep Marjorie, Boebert, and Hawley. Yo, terrific question. Who was there, Andrew? I don't know.
I would just say real briefly that I think that we have an enormous amount to learn from Stacey Abrams. Yes. And I was so glad that she got all of the media attention that she did. And it wasn't the Biden-Harris campaign that got Georgia. It was her. It was her work. It was her groundwork. It was her. And so I agree with what Chris is saying, like the whole focus on who we're trying to unseat and who we're not trying to unseat doesn't make sense. And also there's a danger in unseating somebody that we disagree with and we know to be wrong, because if that power turns, that same thing can be used to unseat AOC or unseat Ilhan Omar, or right, folks that we believe are progressive and radical, and are seen as a danger, to the other side. And I just think that there's an enormous amount we can learn from that grassroots campaign, because she did it. She flipped the state. She flipped the state. She flipped the Senate seat. Her work didn't work for her, but it worked for the people that came behind her, right? And so it's that patience to keep pushing and to build those power structures. to change things.
So I don't have an answer to Andrew's question, but I just can tell you what I think, right? Because we are in this political unrest, this racial unrest, this great divide that we're having, you have to have patsies there, right? We got to keep the chaos going, right? So that we can keep the distractions going. No, remember those 3 men in the room now. So why they won't unseat her? You want to strip of her duties, but you don't want to unseat her, is because, again, it's playing into their agenda. There's an agenda that's occurring here. There's something that's happening here, right? So we have to keep our eyes open. Someone has to be that person, right, where the focus is going to be on over there, so that what we got going over here, nobody is paying attention to. So at the end of the day, this divide that we are seeing, again, it's been here, it's been prevalent, it has not gone anywhere. And I honestly, personally feel that Trump's administration just exacerbated the racism, the divide that was already there, because he was okay with doing it. So you gave the go ahead, right, for other racist individuals to openly occur and act in the manner in which they did. And what you did not anticipate was the insurrection on the Capitol, based on, or maybe you did, because the way you said it, you was taking them on down there, okay, on the Capitol. But it goes to show, it just goes to show the small reverence that those individuals have, and that many individuals have, for our country and just for human beings overall. I strongly believe, and it's just me, that if there had been any politicians within that Capitol that some of those people could have gotten a hold of, that there would have been murders that day. Although we did have them innocent people that were murdered, but I'm talking the ones that they went there to get. And it just shows that lack of reverence. If this is if we say we're building our country on democracy, there's no way in the world that should have happened. That should have never occurred. But in the current state that we are in, they said it was acceptable. You can do that. How do we flip those things? How do we not so much as change people's minds, guys, but I'm talking about just make somebody think of something different. Just maybe what I think isn't it. Let me just take a moment and try to think about something different. It could very well be that versus this.
And it's 2:01. We are at time, and our unwritten contract was to have you be here with us till 2 o'clock. So if you need to leave, feel free to go. If you want to stay back and chit chat with our panelists for a few more minutes, that's fine too. But thank you so much to our wonderful, wonderful panelists. Such an exciting conversation, such an important conversation. And a big hand for all of you, big hand. And thank you to our participants. That the chat was on fire. Thank you so much. That was amazing. And we will see you next month, I hope, at the next Global to Local Racial Justice Series.